Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Restoring Connections podcast. Matt Dawson here. Lovely to be with you. Today, we are diving into the question, what if I need a change, but you don't? That is going to create a tension between us. That's going to create a challenge for sure. Wouldn't it be wonderful if every time I'm in one of my relationships, I sense something needs to change, I'm a little bit uncomfortable? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the other person was feeling exactly what I'm feeling? Sometimes that happens. Sometimes between Cora and I, for example, we're realizing that we want to grow in some way. We want to shift things into a more healthy pattern. And we're both feeling the same thing at the same time. We're both feeling like a change is needed. That's absolutely wonderful. Definitely the exception to the rule. What's far more common is I'm feeling a bit of a change is needed and she doesn't, or she's got a different set of changes that she thinks are needed or feel needed for her, or vice versa. Or in my relationships with other people, this is often the case as well. So I think it's really important to talk about this, because if the only way we're ever able to make a change is if both people in the relationship agree on the change that's needed, you're probably not going to be making any changes at all, like ever. That's far more common. And we see this a lot in relationships. This is where, I'll be honest, the most typical thing that happens is a member of a marriage, a member of a couple, usually it's the woman, will reach out and say, hey, we really need a change. My husband really needs help. My husband really needs a change. And I'm going, oh, okay, awesome. Has he got the memo? Like, does he realize that there's a change needed? I might reach out to him. And he goes, we don't need a change. I'm completely fine. Everything's totally fine. She's got problems. She needs a change, or vice versa. And that's it's a tricky dynamic, and it's something that we have to wrestle with, because you can't force somebody to feel what you're feeling. You can't force somebody to want the change that you want. For a relationship to work, there has to be a foundation of respect. And part of that respect means you are not me. We are not the same person. We're not always feeling the same thing. We're not always pursuing the same thing. I love you, and I feel something different to you. I feel like there's a different needed change than what you're feeling. So we've got to wrestle with that. Here are some examples that come to mind for me, based on some of our own experiences and the experiences with people that we've been able to be helpful to over the years. So perhaps there's a shared victimized mentality, right? Maybe it's a colleague at work, and the core of your connection, maybe not the core of your connection, but a significant dynamic in that relationship is to get together and talk about how the world is out to get you, how basically to talk about all of the oppression surrounding you. Now, that's not to downplay the reality of oppressive things going on, but maybe there's a core dynamic in that relationship that has felt normal up until this point, but you are going through a shift and you're realizing, I don't really want this constant mentality of being victimized all the time. Yes, there are things that are painful. There are realities that are challenging in life, but I want to form a new pattern of thought. That's going to mean a shift in that relationship, because that's a big part of that relationship. This is what we get together and do, or sometimes maybe it's a romantic couple where you've got both members of the couple. That's feeding a lot of the way they make decisions. A lot of the way they go about life is this shared mentality around the world being out to get us and our response to that. That might even be what brought you two together in the first place. And it's felt normal, but you're wanting to grow. But maybe the other person doesn't see it. Maybe the other person doesn't feel the need for that change. What are you going to do? What about talking about people behind their back? What about when that is a normal part of the relationship up until a certain point and you realize, I want something better? Maybe actually you come to a moment where something happens and you realize you're not sure how that person would talk about you behind your back, because a big part of the relationship has been talking about other people behind their backs, and now all of a sudden you're wondering, well, are they doing that to me as well? Because clearly they're the kind of person that's quite happy to talk about people behind their backs. Maybe they're doing that to me as well. And all of a sudden you're going, hang on, I want to shift this dynamic in this relationship. I'd like to have a different kind of relationship where we're not, basically just talking about people behind their back, where we've got a new and healthier dynamic where trust can be built. But maybe that other person doesn't see it. Maybe they don't want that part of the relationship to shift. Or maybe there's dynamics around the abuse of food or drugs or that kind of thing, where that has been a big part of what's brought the relationship together. Something that's been enjoyable, something that's been fun, but it's had a destructive element. And you are realizing, I'd like that to change. I don't want that to be the core, of this relationship anymore. I want to grow beyond that. What about bad spending habits, right? Or the use of credit cards, this kind of thing where it's just felt normal. Okay, well, I can go on and on. We've got, what about shared verbal abuse, where basically we know that's just how this relationship works. Every once in a while, we completely blow up at each other, bite each other's heads off, say things that we deeply regret, say terrible things to each other, but it's normal because that's just what we do. But you don't want that to be normal anymore. You want to grow beyond that. Or even an unhealthy sexual dynamic that's gone on between you and this person for a long time, and you might have enjoyed it for a period and then started tolerating it, or maybe you were just tolerating it from the beginning, but you've come to a point where you don't want to tolerate this anymore. You want to show up more fully in the relationship. That other person doesn't see a need for a change. It's working for them, right? But you need a change. Okay, so here's the question, that back to our core question. What if I need a change, but you don't, right? There's something that we often say, and it's a really hard reality, but I think it's true, that you have to be willing to risk no connection in order to pursue healthy connection. Or you have to be willing to risk at least temporarily less connection. You have to be, how would I say that? You have to be willing to risk less connection temporarily to go after a more healthy connection in that's just true across the board, because it's risky. Shifting a dynamic in a relationship is risky. Change in a relationship is risky, right? But if the only way, again, like I said at the beginning, if the only way I can ever make a change, a positive change for me, is if we make this change together, there's a real problem there, because we're stuck, okay? And remember, we're constantly wanting to seek out, to sniff out and bust cycles of codependence, because they just absolutely crush the life out of a relationship long term. They help us. Remember, everything that we're talking about here in Restoring Connections is about how to build resilience into your most important relationships. This isn't necessarily the kind of stuff that's going to help smooth over every little situation in your core, in every relationship. That's not what we're talking about here. That's a different podcast. That's a different thing. What we're talking about here is how you build resilience into your most important relationships, the kind of relationships that you are wanting to last a lifetime, the kind of relationships that you're wanting to get deeper and stronger and deeper and stronger, and that can handle going through the painful situations that you're inevitably going to go through, right? So when we're thinking about that, you've got to be sniffing out and busting cycles of codependence where we are actually stuck, in this dynamic. So we're asking the question, is there anything that I'm dependent on you for that's beyond what I should be dependent on you for, right? So earlier today, Cora popped in the middle of an important meeting that I was having and really wanted to let me know that actually I've got to pick up Levi an hour earlier from school than what I was supposed to. So she took a risk there. And I'm glad she did, because we depend on each other in our day-to-day flow for transport, right? Healthy, good, wonderful. Got to have communication there. We are depending on each other. When something's in my calendar, I got to do it, and vice versa, right? Okay, I'm depending on someone for my core sense of purpose, depending on her or anybody else for my core sense of identity, for my core sense of individuality. right? Or my ability to actually be me, my ability to show up and actually fulfill my own unique destiny on planet Earth. If that is attached to this person, then what happens is I cannot risk less connection, because this relationship is providing something for me that is just so incredibly core to my existence that to even do anything that might potentially risk connection here is completely anathema to me, and I'm trapped, I'm stuck, and so I don't do it. And then that's where we get this thing where we need a shift in this relationship, and I've got to try to beg the other person to see what I see in the shift that's needed. And it really doesn't work. It really doesn't work. I get it. I've been there. I understand it for sure, but it doesn't work. It doesn't produce the transformation that what we're looking for. So here's a much healthier approach I would like to submit to you. To get to the point where in the relationship, not all changes have to happen together. You don't have to, the relationship can be healthy, full of love, full of life, and there can be enough space for both of you to be able to make the changes that you need to be able to make individually that then end up feeding back into a more healthy relationship. So firstly, you got to ask the question. I've just got 4 things here, a little brief process to walk through. If you're feeling that a change is needed, but you're a bit scared about what that might look like in the relationship. Number 1, getting clarity. What actually is the change that I need to make, and why? Where is this coming from? Get that down in writing. This is what, it's not like, it's just the vibe of the thing is not quite enough, right? It's not enough for you, and it's definitely not going to be enough if there's some point you need to be able to communicate to the other person what's going on with you, which is generally pretty important, right? So you want to be able to get down something like, there's no judgment here towards me or to you, but I would like to get to the point where we are not talking about with me and this person. Again, you're not even talking to the other person about it yet. That comes later. This is just your own sense of clarity. I want to get to the point where me and this person are not speaking poorly of other people behind their back, right? I want to get rid of that dynamic. I need that to shift, or I need this, whatever. One of those situations that I highlighted at the beginning. Get that clarity down, and get down your why. What effect is that having on you currently? That behavior pattern, that dynamic in the relationship, whatever that is, what effect is it having on you? Because if you can nail down, this is the net result of that. It's enjoyable in the moment. You wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't something positive about it. There's some short-term benefit, right, in the moment for all of those different things, all of those different examples, or whatever it is, that you're going through. There's some benefit there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it, right? But what is the long-term effect that it's having on your life? What's the big picture effect that's happening in your life and in the relationship? Okay, number 2. Can I make this change? There's a question you've got to ask. Can I make this change without breaking my promise to this person? Or if you're in a more of a contracted situation, right? Maybe it's an employment situation. Or can I make this change without dishonoring my current commitments? And getting that clarity down is really important, because that's going to inform a lot about how you're going to go about making that change. Maybe it's something that, it's like, I need a change in this particular area, and I can just make that change. That's just a change that I need to make. I never promised you, it doesn't conflict with my marriage vows to you. It doesn't conflict with my work contract. It doesn't conflict. It's just a personal change that I need to make, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to embrace it. Or you're getting clarity that there is a shift here in promise. There is a shift in contract that's needed. Maybe you've made a promise to somebody that you realize looking back, or you've implied something. Maybe you've called someone your best friend, or maybe you've defined something in some way that, this is how we operate, and it's been something that you've actually spoken out. and to change that is going to be, that's going to be painful for that person. They're likely to even feel betrayed by that. If you're saying, hey, I actually need out of this marriage, for example, or I need out of this romantic relationship, that's going to be painful. They might even feel a sense of betrayal around that. Or definitely if you're in a contracted situation, you say, I need to break this contract. Okay, we're not going to go into that. In fact, as I'm saying that, I'm thinking that's probably a good podcast episode. What would the question be? What if I need a change, and what if the change I need might break anyways, I'll work on it. If you've got any ideas, flick it through. I'll work on that. But that's a whole nother topic. But it does need to be wrestled with. It needs to be clarified. Number 3, what am I afraid? We're really getting down to the nitty-gritty here. What am I afraid will happen if I make this positive change? You really got to get that down. And specifically, what belief about this relationship is that fear attached to? Okay, so if I'm afraid that if I make this positive change, you are going to exit the relationship, you are going to resent me, you are going to and then I'm going to feel this way about myself. Just roll with the scenario. I really like when I'm afraid about something, I find it most healthy to actually, rather than just trying not to be afraid, I fully dive into it. I'm not talking about letting that fear steer the ship. I'm talking about letting that fear completely come to the surface and show its grimy face and fully bring out all of its, because that fear, right? The counsel of fear is going after this relationship. The fear hates my core relationships. Fear will drive me towards isolation. If I listen to the counsel of fear, I will destroy my relationships, betray the people that I love. That's where fear is wanting to take me, right? But there is also a short-term kind of a dynamic there where there's probably a warning, an alert that is necessary to heed, right? Like, I'm afraid of putting my hand in that fire because I don't want to be burned. So we need it, but we don't really want it to be driving the car. And so I'm going to let that fully come to the surface. What am I afraid of? And I give it voice, right? And I might write it all down or record it into a voice message, something like that. I'm afraid this will happen. I'm afraid that will happen. I'm afraid this. And if that happens, then this happens and I lose this. And then if I lose my connection to this group or this person, that means that I'm going to lose. That knock-on effect is these 3 people are going to resent me as well. They're going to take their side. The next thing I know, I'm going to be totally alone and isolated for the rest of my life and die in a ditch somewhere, whatever that is. Okay, fill in the blank, wrestle that out. And then you're going, okay, generally speaking, underneath the fear or attached to that fear, there might be a belief about the relationship. There's something, particularly something like, this relationship is my sole source of ... fill in the blank. It's my sole source of approval. It's my sole source of purpose. It's the only thing keeping me it's the only thing keeping my relationship with my children from falling apart. It's the only thing keeping my entire life from falling apart. It's the only thing keeping me, if I lose this relationship, or if distance happens in this relationship, my life falls apart, whatever. You got to be able to wrestle with that and get to the bottom of where is that belief actually coming from. And you've got to be able to get back to a point where you are a whole individual and there is a healthy dynamic in the relationship around who you are as an individual and the wholeness of who you are as an individual and the beauty of that relationship. There's actually 3 entities going on here. There's me, there's you, and the relationship, right? The whole you complete me thing, garbage, right? Right? Like, I want the relationship to thrive between us. Very important. If it didn't thrive, if it dies, right? That will affect me tremendously, but I'm still me. I can still fulfill my purpose on planet Earth. I am a whole individual, and really important for the relationship to be healthy, for that actually to be the case. Okay, so you're getting down with clarity. What am I afraid will happen if I make this change? And that leads to the fourth point, which is, what support am I going to need? Right? Because if I'm afraid about this, but it's necessary, I am going to need support, and I'm probably going to need support outside of the relationship to make this change. And this depends on how big of a change we're talking about. If you're talking about, I want to get into exercising, every morning, that's a positive change that I need from me. I want to shift my diet, right? That maybe you need support. Maybe for sure a shift in diet is going to be extremely difficult. You need some support. Or maybe it's a small thing. You just need to be setting a reminder for yourself, and you just need to make that change. So there's a big scale here, but the harder that change is going to be to make. And if you can be honest with yourself, you should be able to determine, yourself well enough to know, hopefully, how hard that change is going to be to make in your life. And to the degree that it's going to be hard, that's the degree to which you're going to need support. You're going to need accountability. You're going to need people in your life. I definitely need this kind of thing. I've got several people in my life in different areas who I know are going to ask me, hey, how's that going? When we catch up every other week, hey, how's that going? I got my wonderful friend, Pete, who there's certain things that, I know he's going to ask me how that's going. And I love that. That's what I consider a big part of true friendship. He's there, he's supporting me. And I know that it's extremely unlikely that I'm going to be able to make that change in my life that I need outside of support from a close friend. And it's important to recognize, there's a lot of areas where Cora or my teammates are able to, we're working on a change together, but there's other dynamics where I know Cora's not the person who's going to be able to help me make this change, because she might not see the same need for a change. She might not be feeling that need for a change, right? And so I need something outside of this relationship. I need a friend. I need to do a course. I need something. I need some sort of a support mechanism outside of the relationship to give me the strength and the accountability and the encouragement that I need to be able to make that positive change. So just to recap, what's the change that I need to make and why? 2, can I make this change without breaking my promises or dishonoring my commitments? Right? Getting that clarity. Number 3, what am I afraid will happen if I make this change, and what belief is that fear connected to in that whole area, right? If you need help, reach out for help. If you need, and if you don't have anybody else you reach out to us. We'd love to help you in that space. Number 4, what support do I need to make this positive change? And being realistic with yourself. So hopefully all of that is a pathway for you if you currently feel a bit trapped, a bit stuck. It's like, I need this change to happen. But the only way for me to make this change is if this other person feels the same way. I'm hoping that I'm giving you a bit of a pathway. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. In fact, I can pretty much guarantee you it's going to be at least difficult, if not very painful. And it might cost you the relationship. That person might not be willing to go there with you. That person might say, if we can't continue to get together and talk bad about everybody behind their back, that's all that for that other person, that might be the only thing that's in the relationship, or this victimized mentality, or this whatever unhealthy pattern, that might be the main thing for them in the connection. And if you take that away, or maybe just the shame that they feel about the fact that they know a change is needed, and you're the one who had the courage to make it, they might not be able to track with you in that, right? And that's why there's 2 halves of every relationship. There's my half. I know what I'm hoping you will do with your half, but I don't know what you'll do with your half. But here's what I've decided to do with my half, right? And the more you can work through these processes and get clarity within yourself about the change that's needed and why, and the less trapped you feel in the relationship, the more likely it is that you are going to be able to make that change in the most gracious and loving and kind and unreactive way possible. Because What's the alternative? The alternative is you're trapped in a cycle where you believe that you're actually trapped and you can't make a positive change if the other person doesn't want to make the same change. And so what ends up building is resentment after layer after layer after layer after layer. Resentment is building, right? And the relationship is you can either, it's like the difference between ripping the Band-Aid off, going, hey, this is the change that I needed to make, being able to do that with confidence and clarity and kindness. The alternative is letting that resentment build and build and build until there's just an absolute explosion, a total rupture in the relationship. And so, yeah, I think when you think of it like that, I'm hoping that encourages you to think to yourself, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I don't know what it's going to mean for the relationship. I know what I'm hoping it will produce, but I'm going to go after it. And so what do we do with the member, when the spouse reaches out to us and says, we need a change? And I go, okay, does your partner believe that do they need a change? And I reach out and they say, no, I'm totally fine, right? I can either reach back to the first person who reached out and said, sorry, you're stuck. Your partner doesn't want to change. So, you're screwed. No, I don't believe that. I would never say that because I don't believe that. I said, we'll help you. You want to change? Awesome. Good for you. Let's go after the change that you're wanting to make. And we'll see together. We'll find out together what kind of shift that has in the relationship. But we don't know because the relationship involves two. But you want to change? Let's do it. Let's go after this thing. And the more empowered the individual feels, the more empowered I feel to be able to pursue positive changes in my life, the less likely I am to build resentment towards Cora because I don't feel trapped in this relationship. I actually feel free. I feel supported. I feel loved. Most of the time, I feel loved and supported and respected, by Cora, but not always. And she certainly doesn't always feel that from me, right? So, yeah, hopefully that's producing a bit of a picture there and giving you the encouragement that you need to be able to go after it. There is a pathway forward. It's risky for sure, but it's definitely worth it. It's essential, an essential part of a healthy relationship. Okay, that's it, friends. See you next time.
We hope you found the conversation and stories on today's podcast helpful and insightful. If you want to go deeper, Restoring Connections offers online courses that cover key topics like personal responsibility, proactive care, powerful communication, and healthy boundaries. Go to www.restoringconnections.nz for more information. This podcast is funded by generous supporters from all over the world. Please consider supporting by going to the Restoring Connections website and hitting the Contribute button. By partnering with us, you're helping to provide mentoring, workshops, and training to others who are also restoring their connections.